Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. We're going to have a look at question 2.2 of the final of 2020 today, that is database programming section, making use of ADO tables. The first thing you want to do in any exam where you are either going to use SQL or database programming is tear off the appendix that includes the database design and examples of some data as well. I've just put them here in a PowerPoint presentation, and there are two tables. This one is called Tbl Employees, and it contains the information about the employees, and it's important to take note of data types. So employee ID, you can also see there they indicate that it's a unique ID, so that means this would be my primary key, my unique value for this table for each employee. Then the name and the last name, hourly wage, which is a currency, job title is text, and then first aid training, which is Boolean, so either yes or no. This here at the bottom is Tbl hours logged, and we have the log ID and auto number, which is a unique number. So for Tbl hours logged, this would be my primary key. If you look at the link here, you can also see the primary keys indicated there where the relationship is indicated. Here is also an employee ID that says a unique ID that identifies the employee to whom the hours logged belongs to. As you can see in the relationship, that is how the tables were linked. One employee has many records indicating their hours logged. And here we have a log date field with a date time data type and hours worked as a number. And then important to keep in mind your relationship. We would expect this question as part of question 2.2 in your final exams. And here, this is question 2.2.1. You need to display the employee ID, last name, and job title of all the employees that have completed the first aid training. And then you also need to count the number of employees who completed the first aid training and display the results as shown below. So here is an example of the output that I'd like you now to try, and before you continue to watch the memo. Press pause and try it yourself. Note that there's an empty line here that I always call a hidden question. Before we continue, I want to take you back to my Dandelion Delphi Book 2, where I explain how to read from the tables using database programming. It's important that you always have a dot first, while not end of the table, begin end, and then the last line before your end should be then the table dot next. Anything else goes above this line here. So here you can see I have Tbl employees dot first, while not end of the table. There I have my dot next. Then we have if the Tbl employees, the first aid training was equal to true, then I have to count and display. Since I'm using inc iCount, I have to initialize above the loop there. So I initialize there above the loop, make iCount 0. The reason why we do it in the button and not in Form 1 Activate is while the program is running, if they click on this button the first time, it would have the correct number. But if you didn't initialize it here and the user clicks on the same button a second time, that iCount will be double the amount because it wasn't reset back to 0. So that's why we initialize above a while loop or any loop, we initialize our counters and other like string variables there as well. And the output was pretty simple because all of these fields were text fields. So we didn't have to use any typecasting like string to float or into string or float to string f. And important is that you included your #9s there to be able to display these in neat columns. They did set up the tab stops for you. Make sure that your dot next is outside of your if statement, else you will fall into an infinite loop. And there's my open line, and then finally they wanted you to display iCount. So how many of these employees have their first aid training? And don't be lazy with the labeling. Make sure you match the paper because there's often a mark for these labels. In this next question, they're asking us to add a new record to Tbl Employees. Here they give us a description of which fields they are. Like for example, first aid training was one word. So it is important then to go back to those appendixes showing you exactly how the fields were spelt. But these are the values that you had to add to it. And then they just give you an example of the last few records once it had ran successfully. So if yours ran successfully, you should see this guy, Robert Loebscher, at the bottom. So press pause and try it yourself. This is the memo for that question. We have insert. And remember, whenever you have an insert or a dot edit, you have to have this dot post afterwards. So we list the field names on the left, and all we do here is add the values to the right. These are all text data types, so the values there we'll put between these quotes. Whereas hourly wage was 195.00, you didn't have to add the 0.00, 195 would be enough. And then first aid training, we assigned to true there. I just want to show you some tips here. If we add this new employee, so we click on the button, that guy has been added, Robert Loebscher. Now, should I want to click on this button again, it's going to give me this error. And if you read carefully, it says a lot of things, but then it would say they would create duplicate values in the index, primary key, or relationship. So since I have added employee ID EMP 986 already by clicking on it the first time, and employee ID is the primary key, I cannot click on it a second time because we can't have duplicate values in the primary key. So in order to fix that, so let's say you did need to test this program of yours for a second time because you weren't sure if the first one maybe didn't work properly, that's what this button here is for. The restore database, and code is always provided for you to be able to reset it. So should I now click on restore database, there's a message, do you want to reset it? Then I click yes, and then it tells me it has been reset. You will scroll down and you won't find that guy in there any longer. And now I'm able to test it for a second time, clicking on add new employee, and there he is. So that is what this little button there is for. In this question, this is the last one for this section, we are going to change the logged hours. You can see the button is also called update hours worked of the selected record. So that means we don't need to search for anything. We don't need a while loop to search for a user. They are going to click on the DB grid, and we have to make a change to the active record, or sometimes also called the current record. And the user will enter the value in an edit box, and then we need to replace the current number of hours worked. Update is asked in several different ways. Replace is what we're being asked now. We're not asked to add on to it. So you're going to have to read carefully to see what are you supposed to do with an update. And then they just ask you to write the code for this. So you can press pause and try it yourself. I'll show you the example of output soon. Here's an example of when the log ID was 758 and 11 was entered. And here's another one that you can test with 774 when 8 was entered. So as you can see, those values replaced what was previously there and did not add on to it. So here is the input from the user. We just have to string to in the numbers that they entered in the edit box. So there they enter the hours in the edit box, and then we have .edit, and remember I said with every insert and edit goes a post, and then hours worked is the field we're changing, and we're changing it to hours. Should they have asked us to add these hours onto the existing hours, we would have done this. We would have taken that, take the existing hours and add onto it. But this is not what was asked in this exam. Sometimes it is asked that way though. Thank you guys for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. Please feel free to leave some comments and some likes. If you dislike it, I'd like to hear from you too to see why you don't like it. And for more information and more practice, you can go to Dandelion Delphi Book 2. Hope to see you soon.